Okay, welcome back. We are on Yud Tet Amud Aleph of Sanhedrin, 19a, page 108 in the Steinsaltz. Yud Tet Amud Aleph, 19a 2, I think, in the art scroll. So we just finished last time talking about how we do the shura. Right? Remember the rows we were talking about funerals, and we were talking about how the originally it was the mourners that stood still and the rows of people walked past them. And then because of an event where two families decided to have a fight about who would go first, and it was an unseemly occurrence at a funeral, the rabbis changed it and said, right, we're not having this here. We'll have the people standing in two rows and the mourners themselves will walk through, which is the way we do it now. And then we learnt that that's how they, that's what we learned last time, okay? That's where we finished. Hitkinu, I better share the screen. Wait a minute, let me share the screen. There we go. We've got the screen yet? Good. Okay. They made a decree that the people should stand and the mourners would pass by, which is the way we do it now at our funerals. So that's where we ended last time. Now, the Gemarah does a very typical Gemarah thing now, and is going to go off at a little bit of a tangent based on language. Now, remember that all of this stuff was mainly learned off by heart. Manuscripts of the Gemarah were very hard to come by. They were very expensive because they had to be written by hand. That's why they're called manuscripts. And it was long before the printing press. So very few people had a copy of the Gemarah. So the way that people used to remember it was the way that probably many of us learned stuff for our exams, right? Whether it be our O-levels, A-levels, or whatever they have, the equivalent in Australia.
Matriculation.
Matriculation, thank you. Or indeed a lot of my medical stuff. And that is via mnemonics. Okay, mnemonics. A mnemonic is a method of remembering stuff using either the first letters of things or a little ditty that you would remind you of something. The most famous one for us Brits, I don't know if you had this, Hannah, but for us Brits, probably the most famous one we learned in school was the spectrum of the rainbow, right? The colours of the spectrum of light. Okay, come on, after you're nodding, what was it? Come on, unmute and tell us what you remember.
There's a few. Every good boy deserves favour.
Richard of York.
Yeah, that's a music.
Richard of York gains battle in vain.
That's the one
I'm
I was
thinking
taught. Richard of York gained battle in vain. But I was taught another one, which today would be a bit non-PC. I was taught this one. I don't know if any of you knew this one. Remember, O ye Germans, Britain is victorious. That's a good one, isn't it? There was also another one, which I'm not going to tell you because it's very rude, that we were all taught to remember the cranial nerves. There are 12 cranial nerves, which every single medical student knows because the mnemonic is very rude. But anyway, I digress. So those are, now the Gemarah often uses mnemonics in order to help people to remember what's going on in the
10 plagues are the most memorable ones, aren't they? The Sachadash.
Okay, very good. Yes, very good, Johnny. Tzach Adash Be'achav, which is the mnemonic for the 10 plagues. Correct. Very good.
And also after Rosh Hashanah, Yikosevon, what is it? Some
Tefillah Tzedakah, Tshuva.
Yeah, there's one for that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so here, what they're doing here, you can see at the top of the page there, in brackets, it says, I'm just having a look. Yes, it's the same in brackets in the Vilna Shas. Chazar v'halach v'siper. What does that mean? Chazar means he returned. V'halach, and he went. V'siper, and he told a story. Or he spoke. He siper from the saper, to tell a story. Okay. Now, that's the mnemonic.
Breaking up.
Breaking up. Okay. Give me a sec. Michael will bring thumbs up when I can carry on with the line. No, it's still not doing that. No, any better? Approving. This is the long one, but normally lasts this long. No, no good. Can't hear me. I'll give it a few more seconds, and maybe I'll.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Good. All right. I was just about to rejoin. Right. So we've got these three things. He went away, or he returned. He walked, and he told a story. What's this talking about? So this is a mnemonic to remember three things that this chap Rami Bar Abba said. Okay, he said like this: Hechzir Rabbi Yossi et hadavar leyoshno b'tzipori. Anybody been to Tzipori?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, you've been to Tzipori, Hannah?
Yes.
Where is it?
In the north.
Okay, and what is it?
Oh, it's where the learned sages moved to when they left. No, not they moved to Yavna, but there was a community of scholars at Sipori.
Right. No, you were right, Hannah. They left Yavna. After Yavna, they went to Tzipori. They went to the Galil. So Tzipori, Tiberia, all those places around there were where all the sages of the Mishnah and the Amoraim made a lot of the Mishnah and the Gemarah. So Tzipori was a center of Jewish learning. It's an interesting place to visit if you've never been. We've been on a shul tiyul, I think, twice to Tzipori. It's a fascinating place because they have recreated a Mishnaic village, as it were, what was going, how life was lived at the time of the Mishnah. There's a very, very good visitor center there with excellent audio visual stuff. It's a thoroughly recommended place to visit, and you can actually stand in the place where Rabbi Akiva was, and you can stand there and imagine what was going on there, this discussion. It's absolutely fascinating place to visit. Anyway, Rabbi Yossi returned the matter to its original state. Okay, leyoshno. You can see the word yashan in there. What's the word yashan mean? It means old. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi returned the matter to its original state. What's he talking about? Sheyiyu avelim omdim v'chol ha'am ovrim. That the avelim, the mourners, would stand and the people would pass by. Remember, we said that was the original way they did it. Because of the fight between those two families, they changed it so that the people stood still and the mourners walked through. In Tzipori, Rabbi Yossi returned the custom to its original state, presumably because he felt that the people could be trusted now not to fight over who was going to go first, and therefore he returned it to his original state. Let me just deal with that phone call quickly. Just tell them I am not available. There we go. Right. So that was the first thing he did. Now, since we're in Rami Bar Abba territory of what Rabbi Yossi did, this is how the Gemarah goes. Rabbi Yossi spoke about our topic, which is mourning. While we're talking about what Rabbi Yossi did in Tzipori, there's another two things that he did that the Gemarah throws in for good measure. V'amar Rami Ba'aba, and Rami Ba'aba said, Hitkin Rabbi Yossi b'Tzipori. Another thing that Rabbi Yossi instituted in Tzipori was as follows. This is very, very important and relevant. Shelo tehei isha mahalechet bashuk uvana achareha. Okay, I'm just going to take that off the screen so that you don't cheat. So it says that a woman should not walk in the marketplace with her son following behind her. Why not? Anybody who's not looked on, why not?
The thought that came to mind was that maybe they kidnapped children in those days too.
Okay, they kidnap children, Michael.
I was just thinking safety, basically.
To what, sorry?
Safety.
Safety, yeah. Any other suggestions? Okay, I think you're right. The Gemarah says exactly what both of you have said, but it goes even further than what Hannah said. Hannah's correct. Let's have a look what happened. Why did Rabbi Yossi institute this? Mishum ma'aseh shahaya, because of a story, an incident that occurred, shahaya, that happened. What happened? Well, we're not told what happened. What do you think might have happened? You have to look in Rashi to tell you what happened, and I'll tell you what happened in a minute because I've looked in the Rashi. What do you think might have happened in this case where a woman was walking in the shuk with her son behind her? Well, Hannah's right.
They would take advantage of the woman.
But it didn't end there. What happened after the kid got kidnapped?
They would take advantage of the woman so that she could get her son back.
Correct. That's exactly what happened. So
I've read that I've read that at the bottom of the page.
Okay, well done. Well done for admitting that you didn't think of it all on your own. So what happened was the child was kidnapped, and of course the mother is beside herself with concern, and somebody comes along and says, "I know where they're keeping your son. I'll take you there." And she says, "Oh yeah, thank you very much." And they take her to the house where the child is being held by these wicked people, and of course they take her in there and they rape her, and nothing is new under the sun. There are evil people who kidnap children and rape women, and there always have been, and sadly there probably always will be. So Rabbi Yossi made a decree, not so much a halacha as a health and safety edict, if you like. Rabbi Yossi was the first health and safety officer of Tzipori, I suppose, and said that you should not walk in the marketplace where there's lots of people around without keeping a very close eye on your children. Okay, number two, that. So Chazar, he returned. What does that mean? He returned the halacha to its original state. The second part of the mnemonic, the halach, and he went. That is his, to remind you of his edict that you shouldn't walk, you shouldn't holech, you shouldn't go in the market without looking after your children carefully. And the third one, siper, is an interesting one. Hitkin Rabbi Yossi b'Tzipori. The third thing that Rabbi Yossi instituted in Tzipori, sheyehu nashim mesaprot b'veit hakisei. That the women, Michael's got a face on him there. Why have you got a face on you there, Michael?
It just seems a little bit odd that they're only allowed to talk in the washroom.
Okay, so Rabbi Yossi says that women should speak to one another when they are in the bathroom. Beit hakisei is the American word for bathroom, right? We call it a toilet, but the Americans don't use that word, toilet. they use the word bathroom for toilet, which is a misnomer because most toilets don't have a bath in them. Okay, it's not a bathroom at all. It's just a euphemism for toilet. Okay, beta kisei is also a euphemism because what does that word mean? Beta kisei, beit,
House of the chair. The
house of the chair,
of the seat.
house of the seat or the chair. And what chair is it talking about? It's talking about the toilet. Okay, and in fact, this is a very commonly used expression. Beta kisei, clear. It means the house of the house of the chair means the room where there is a seat, i.e., the toilet. And in fact, my sons still use that expression. If I call them and they don't answer me, I might get a text back saying "on the throne" or "in the throne room" or words to that effect. Beta kisei, on the throne. Okay, so this edict of Rabbi Yossi was that women should talk to one another whilst they are on the throne. Now, why was that? Why would he suggest such a strange thing? Why should women talk to one another while they're on the throne?
Make sure they didn't fall in.
Make sure they didn't fall in. Okay. Well, let's go take a step back. Where are these throne rooms? These throne rooms are not in their houses. Indoor throne rooms, indoor toilets are a very modern invention. When did indoor toilets become more common than not? I don't know about Australia, but you can answer that in a minute, Hannah. I'll ask the Brits. In what year were there finally more inside toilets than outhouses?
1949.
Okay. Anybody want to have another guess? I think you're about right. It was the early 50s, actually.
Yeah.
The early 50s, after they'd finished clearing the slums. So early to mid 50s,
Yeah.
where they'd finished where the Labour government that came in after the war had embarked on a very rapid program of slum clearance and new building, and that went on for the 10 years after the war. By about the mid 50s in Britain, most houses had inside facilities of some kind or another. What about in Australia, Hannah? Any idea?
No idea whatsoever. But I remember that we had an outdoor outhouse. But I think for most of my life, most homes had one inside.
Yeah, so it'll be about the same time. So the point is that in Sipori, which is probably Rabbi Yossi's time, which is 1800 years ago, there weren't many, if any, inside toilets. They were all outside. And they weren't like we had, well, not me, because I was born in 1959, and I was fortunate enough to live with an inside toilet. Although I did visit my parents, my father's place where he lived as a child, because he lived above the shop, and they did have an inside toilet, but they also had an outside one.
Yeah, we did.
You also had one, Michael. You had an outing.
Yeah, in 54, my parents moved somewhere, and that had an outside as well as inside toilets.
Yeah. So why am I telling you that? Yeah, so they didn't have, back in the day in Rabbi Yossi's time in Sipora, they didn't have individual outhouses. They had communal latrines, right? Where you'd go, there would be a certain area, so there'd be public toilets. You'd have a whole, I suppose, I never did the army. Anybody here ever do the army? No? But I remember my father telling me, there'd be latrines, wouldn't they, in the army? You'd have a whole section of toilets, and if you were a naughty boy, you had to go and clean the latrines. That was one of the punishments if you got, if you were, you know, if your shoes weren't shiny enough, or if you were late on parade or something. So they had
kibbutz, in kibbutz Teli Yitzhak in '68, if you were badly behaved, you had to do the lol as opposed to the where they kept the chickens.
Right. Okay. So it's the same idea. But back in the day of Rabbi Yossi and Tzipori, they will have had public latrines, communal latrines, which would have been set aside from a certain area. And when you went to the loo, you would go to this latrine and you'd go into your own individual cubicle of the throne house, and you'd sit there. Now, the problem was that it would appear they didn't have such good locks on the doors. And so what would happen was people would, well, you know what would happen. People would interrupt you while you were sort of, you know, doing what you needed to do. And so Rabbi Yossi says that women, and by the sound of it, it sounds like there were certain times for women to go to the latrines and certain times for men to go to the latrines, because he's assuming that women are all there together. Because what he's saying is that women should converse whilst they're in the Beit HaKisei, in order to prevent them from being secluded with men. And so Rabbi Steinsaltz helpfully adds in here, since the public bathrooms were outside the city, a man might enter to take advantage of a woman, but he would be warded off by the women's conversation. So a man might turn up at the throne house, the latrines, in order to take advantage of a woman who's gone there to do what she needed to do. And if the women there go together, as it were, or if there are women there in a few cubicles and they're talking to one another, it will deter the man from doing anything that he shouldn't do. And so this was another safety edict of Rabbi Yossi. So what I said before, that Rabbi Yossi was the first health and safety officer, it seems that at least if he wasn't the first, he was certainly chief health and safety officer. He has the concerns of the women, and of course he was perhaps the first person for women's rights as well, because he's worried about women getting kidnapped because they haven't looked after their kids properly, and he's worried about them getting raped by men wandering into the women's toilets. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. What is one of the biggest problems these days is this situation of safe spaces for women, isn't it? That's all in the news. That women don't feel safe in their safe spaces in women's toilets because transgender things who pretend to be women are allowed to go into these places and are not, and they don't feel safe. So Rabbi Yossi was a properly modern man. He was considering the modern problems of the world, or put another way, there is nothing new under the sun. Okay, now it's an interesting little diversion of the. You've got your hand up, Hannah. What would you like to add?
I was just going to say, I don't know whether I should say it, but I'll say it anyway. When I was young and not religious, I went to what was called Habonim camp. I think you've got Habonim in England.
We do, yes, very strong Habonim in England.
And the summer camp was 10 days, and it was out in the sticks, you know, like in the country. And whoever was setting up the camp set up latrines, and the latrine was communal, is my point. It was several seats or whatever's, sheets of wood and whatever, and you could sit around and talk. In other words, they weren't individual cubicles because it was only set up for a temporary thing, and I can just imagine, you know, like sitting around talking, as women sometimes have a tendency to do. It was all out in the open, and it was all. I mean, there was a. What can I say? There was a cloth, a wool between, closing it off and everything, so that you couldn't see from outside. But inside, it was definitely communal. And
Well, that's probably what Rabbi Yossi was talking about. I think that those of us who went to various camps, I never went to Habonim camp, I went to other camps, will be familiar with the setup that you've described. And you can imagine, can't you, that a person who was not of good moral standing could take advantage of that situation. Okay, very good. That's interesting. Right, just on the screen, by the way, is where Tzipori is in the Galil, due east of Tveria. Over there, there's the Gemarah.
Your voice is going again.
Okay, I'll just hang on a few seconds. I'm not very excited. I'm just showing you the map. But
Johnny, you're broken up. You're broken up.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the thumbs up. I'm waiting for Michael to put his thumb up. He's not wanting to do so yet. Now he's okay. Right, so I'm just pointing out to you on the map here where Tzipori is. It's there due east of Tveria. Bit of a triangular thing between Akko and Tveria. There is Tzipori, well worth a visit. Rabbi Steinsaltz tells us that there's a little N here, which means there's a note somewhere. Let's have a look at this. Here we go. What does he say? Some early commentaries explains that this ordinance to mean that women should speak audibly in any structure where the entrance lacks a door that locks, so that male passers-by will know not to enter and be alone with a woman there. Okay, so that's the corollary of Rabbi Yossi's halacha, is that if a woman is in a place where it is not safe to be on her own, in an unsafe space for women, that women together should speak audibly in order to put off male passers-by, and that's a corollary of this halacha.
That's why the girls always go in twos now.
Say that again, Johnny.
That's why the girls always seem to go in twos to the bathroom.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's why they go in twos. Yes, that could well be. There's also an H here, which means there's a halachic thing here. Let's see if we can find that.
Yes.
Here we go. The sages instituted an ordinance that women should converse with one another in the bathroom in order that a man not enter and be secluded with them. Some authorities say this ordinance is not in effect in modern times when bathrooms are in the city, not out in the fields. Okay, so an interesting little diversion from our Gemarah there. And the reason that they brought the diversion is the connection between Rabbi Yossi and Tzipori and his first comment, which was to do with our Gemarah. First comment was about how you do the row. And then while we were there, we had another couple of Rabbi Yossi's gems, which were that women should look after their kids in the shuk, and women should chat to themselves when they are in the throne house. Okay, let's carry on. We now go back to, having digressed for a few lines, we go back to the idea of what's going on with the shura, with the line. Now, this next little piece of Gemarah seems to indicate a halacha. Let's have a look at it. Rav Menashe Bar Uta says as follows: She'ilt et Rabbi Yoshia Rabba. I asked a shaila. You can see the word shaila or she'elah in modern Hebrew in that word there. I asked a shaila of Rabbi Yoshua the Great. Who was Rabbi Yoshia the Great? Well, he was one of the Tanaim. And where were they when he asked this question? Beveit Almin Dehutzal. They were in the cemetery. Beit Almin. Beit Almin is also the modern Hebrew word for cemetery. What does it literally mean?
House of the people.
Beit Kisei was the house of the chair. What's Beit Almin?
An alman is a widow, and an almanah is a widower. So it would come from the same source.
Okay, I never thought of that. You're right. But then I'll ask you the question, where does Alman and Almanah
It's
come from?
people, isn't it? People.
Actually, I don't think that is the,
Elam is a
thinking
young
about it,
child.
Hannah, I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure you're right. How do you spell Alman or Almanah?
With
With
an
an
Aleph.
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 Aleph, and this is with an ayin. I don't think it's the same word. What does Beit Almin mean? What does the
Means
word
people. People, isn't it?
Olam.
Okay, Olam. What does Olam mean?
The
The world.
existence, the world.
World. Okay, and what's the plural of Olam?
Olamim.
Okay, and then what is the another way of saying the plural in certainly in Aramaic? Almin. Okay, so Beit Almin is literally the house of worlds, plural. Which worlds are we talking about?
Olam hazeh ve'olam haba.
Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. It is the house where both of those worlds meet together. They meet together, Olam Hazeh, because we, living people, will go there, and the people who are going to visit or bury are going to a different world, Olam Haba. So Beit Almin is the word for cemetery, okay? The house of worlds. Another word for cemetery, Beit HaKvarot, means the house of graves. Kever is a grave. But Beit Almin is what we use generally. You'll see that on Shiva notices when, you know, they'll say that the Levaya will be at Beit Almin Vatikim. It'll be at the Vatikim cemetery. Beit Almin is the cemetery. Right. So why are we being told that he asked this question in the cemetery? Well, you don't know what the question is yet, so you can't answer that question, but have that question in mind as we go through the next little piece of Gemarah. So Reb Menashe Bar Ut says, I was in the cemetery of this place called Hutzel, don't know where that is, and I asked a question to Rabbi Yoshia the Great. Now, it doesn't tell us what the question is, it tells us what the answer is. So from the answer, you can understand what the question is. Michael, are you just playing with your pen, or you're wanting to ask a question?
I'm playing with my pen.
Okay, right, okay. So the answer to the unspoken question is, Ein shura b'chuta me'asara b'nei adam. A row for comforting mourners cannot be less than pachut. Chuta is the feminine version of pachut, meaning less than 10 men. You need a minyan for a row of mourners. Okay, and furthermore, David's looking it up in the black book. Yes, David, you're looking it up in the black book. Just show us the black book. Show us the cover. Mourning in halacha. Any good English Jew has got one of those in his house. The Bible, if you pardon the pun, of the halachot, according to Minhag Anglia at least, of mourning. David's looking it up. No, not Minhag Anglia.
No, it's Art Scroll.
Art Scroll, Minhag Art Scroll, even better. Okay, so David's looking it up for us, and I'm pleased he's looking it up because I'm going to tell you something in a minute about it. So, according to this Gemarah, you need a minyan to make a shura, and more than that, ein avelim min minyan. The avelim themselves don't count in the minyan. So, if you've got 8 mourners, right? You've got, I don't know, a husband and 8 and 9 and 7 sons. And you've only got 4 mourners, 4 comforters. The 4 comforters cannot make a row of 2 either side, because even though you've got a minyan of people, the mourners themselves don't count in that number. You need, according to Rabbi Yoshia, you need 10 people for a shura, for a row.
On each side, does that mean, Johnny?
Sorry?
Does that mean on each side? 10
No, it
people?
means 10 in total, 5 on each side.
Right, okay.
And then he goes further and he says, Ben Shavelin Omdim Cholam Ovrim, whether or not it is the original method of the mourners staying still and the people passing by, or whether it's the changed version of the people standing in rows and the mourners working through. On either scenario, according to Rabbi Yoshia, the halacha is that you need a minyan. And what is the halacha according to Art Scroll, please?
It's actually a Mishnah in Megillah.
And what does Art Scroll say?
It's the Mishnah in Masechet Megillah that's being quoted.
And does it paskin like that?
Yes.
Okay. And so if we look at the bottom of the page here, Ein Shura Pchuta Me'asara Bnei Adam, the consoling line consists of no fewer than 10 people, not including the mourners. And Rav Steinsaltz quotes the Rambam, Hilchot Evel, 13, chapter 1. If we go to that, which I'm not going to, you'll probably find the Mishnah in Megillah that David has quoted. So I asked my son, what do you do when you do your shura? What if there's less than a minyan of people? Do you do a shura? And he said, no. But that very rarely happens. And that is, why does it very rarely happen? Because what do we try very hard to do when there's a burial?
To go to the funeral.
Yeah, we try very hard that there should be a minyan. And if there isn't a minyan, then that's very sad and unusual. So
Well,
the halakha is...
in the United Synagogue in the UK, the shura is normally only done when there are loads and loads of people. If there are fewer people, so people can go past the mourners in their chairs, they don't bother with a shura.
That may well be because of a time thing. I don't know, not sure. So what you're saying is there is a distinction in your experience between big crowds and small crowds, not necessarily a distinction between a minyan and not a minyan.
Yeah, because basically, if there's a big crowd, it would take them far too long to go past the mourners' chairs. So therefore, instead, they do the shura, which seems to be only when there's far too many people to go past the chairs. Okay,
that's interesting, because in some ways that's a bit upside down, isn't it? Because, wait, no, is it upside down? Wait a minute. No, it's not upside down. It's correct. Because what was the original minhag? The original minhag was for the people to pass by the mourners. The Rabbanan changed it because of the unseemly bum fight that went on between the two families. So it would have seemed that the best way of doing it, the original way of doing it, is for the people to pass by. What you're saying fits, not because they would have a fight, but just because the circumstances mean that it's easier and more manageable if you do a shura. And so therefore the shura in your experience, Michael, is only when the original method would be too difficult to institute. That's what you're saying. And I think that actually fits. My experience in, shall we say, the more frummer experience is that the shura is done as a lechatchila, as in the first instance, as opposed to only because the other way isn't right. Is that your experience, Johnny and David? Have you ever seen a sort of, MH type levaya without a shura?
We discussed this a few weeks ago in the shiur, Johnny. And
I can't remember what your experience was now.
I think we came to the conclusion that it's been adopted by the United Synagogue fairly recently on account of the United Synagogue becoming a bit frummer and the members becoming more knowledgeable.
Okay, yes, I remember that conversation now. And so it's interesting because
Here it seems to be done at like near the graveside, as the mourners are leaving the grave. In Manchester, we did it in the OL, I think.
That's probably because we wanted to get into the OHEL as quickly as possible because it's probably raining.
Oh, that could be.
No. That's the difference between the minhag of Chutz La'aretz and here.
We used to sit down and take our shoes off and then do these shiur.
Okay, in Israel there is no ohel after the conclusion of the Levaya. There's the Levaya, there's the Kaddish, then the Shura, and then that's it. Whereas in Chutz La'aretz, if you remember, you go back and you say the Noam, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely an element of getting back into the OHEL as quickly as possible, because often it's not very pleasant. Cemeteries in England, don't know when they manage to get them in the windiest, wettest place that you could possibly have. They're all very unpleasant places to be. Certainly the one. But
also because in Israel they say Vihi Noam before the Levaya. Whereas in Minhag Anglia, certainly is there after the Levaya in the oil.
Right, interesting. Okay, didn't know that. Okay, so that's interesting, different minhagim. I don't know, Michael, whether you're right and whether it's done like that for those reasons. But if it is, the second thing I would say is I don't know if they chose to do it that way because of our Gemarah. But I'm going to say that if you're right, that that's the way they do it, you could certainly make out a case to say that that is a good way of doing things, because they are fulfilling the original method and only going to the sort of secondary method in secondary circumstances. So let me just...
Actually, Johnny, just going back to the Art Scroll book, there's no mention in here of going back to the Ohel after the Levaya. It ends with the Shura. So this is very possibly Minhag Anglia to go back to the Ohel.
Yeah, that may well be. I have to say that in recent years, I may be wrong on this, but my recollection is in recent years in funerals that I've been to in England, that we haven't gone back to the Ohel. That at the Kever, the Rav has said, has already said V'noam, and then gives the instructions as to where the Shiva is taking place and what time davening is at the Kever, and then instructs everybody to go and wash their hands. I could be wrong on that, but that is my feeling. Is that in recent times, maybe it's because I've not gone to Minhag Anglia funerals and they've been more NH type funerals. I don't know. I've just got that sense in my head. I could be wrong. That's not Michael's experience. Michael's experience is
certainly in Bushy Cemetery, they always go back to one of the halls. Right.
Interesting. Okay. All right, these are very interesting. One of the things that we said last week actually was that there are tons of minhagim over Avelot and very few halachot. It's nearly all minhag. So you're not decrying minhag because you should try and stick to your minhag, but it's not surprising that there are various different ways of doing things. All right, let's go on just for a little while. That's where we're up to now. So. We're now, actually, I think we'll stop because I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. I could do with a little bit of prep time, but let's just. Oh, my screen's frozen. My share.
You had a question on the question, if you remember, Johnny.
Oh, I had a question on the question. Okay, let's deal with that. Very good. Thank you for reminding me. So the question is, why are we told that this was in the Beit Almin? That he asked this question. Why do we need to know that he was in the cemetery when this question was asked? The simple answer is because that's where it occurred, right? There might have been a situation where there were only 8 or 9 people and they didn't do a row. And Rav Menashe may have asked Rav Usher, why aren't we doing a row here? And he says, because you only do it when there's 10. But there's another aspect of this that we can learn something from. Any ideas of what I'm talking about? It's in a footnote in the art scroll. I didn't think of it myself. It's in the footnote in the art scroll, which alerted me to it. It's not, I don't think it's in the Stein's Arts. So I'll tell you the answer to the question. Why did the Gemarah specifically mention the Beit Almin? There are certain things that you can't do in the Beit Almin, in the cemetery. What are they?
Chat idly.
Yeah, you can't chat idly. That is true. What do you have to do with your tzitzit?
Put them inside.
So
Why?
So you don't embarrass
Don't embarrass who?
the people in the deceased.
The deceased. And why might you be embarrassed?
Can't hear you now. You've gone off.
Okay,
If they can't do sit anymore.
broken.
Okay, did you hear Hannah?
No, no.
No, you didn't hear anybody. Okay, let's just wait a second or two because we'll just. Okay, we're okay now.
Yes, yes.
Right. So you didn't hear what Hannah said? I asked the question, why would they be embarrassed? And Hannah said, Hannah,
Because they can't wear tzitzit anymore. They can't.
they can't do the mitzvah anymore. It's almost like we're sort of rubbing it in their noses. Oh, look at me, I've got tzitzit on, and you can't do it. So we tuck them in so as not to embarrass them. What else can't they do? Well, there's lots of things they can't do. They can't breathe or walk or talk or any of those things. But what are the mitzvah that we can do in a cemetery that they can't do?
The Mace Mitzvah.
They can't do that because they are the Mace Mitzvah. Right, you're right. But they can't learn Torah. Right? So it is forbidden in a cemetery to learn Torah. Okay? You are not allowed to get out. If you're waiting in the cemetery, and let's say you're the first to get to the graveside, and you can see there's a big funeral here, and there's going to be a 5-10 minute wait till everybody arrives, you're not allowed to get out your pocket mishnayos and start learning. It's asur. You cannot learn in a bet almin because of the same reason. However, you are allowed to learn inyanei smachot. You can learn. We talked about this word last time as well, didn't we, David? Inyanei smachot is a euphemism for matters pertaining death. Okay, we call it inyanei smachot, meaning matters pertaining to happy times, because we don't want to use that expression about death. So you're allowed to learn the halachot of death and minhagim of death and all those things. So that's why, says the Meforshim, that's why the Gemarah specifically points out that this conversation, this about the halachot of the shura, took place in the cemetery to demonstrate that those kind of halachot we are allowed to learn about in a cemetery. What you couldn't do is learn about the halachot of, I don't know, uprooting a fruit tree. That just came into my mind because I had a shai that asked me about a fruit tree yesterday, or anything else to do with that, to do with nothing to do with death things. So that's why it says there, this inyan. Okay, we've finished that now, and so we're going to stop there because we've got another little S here. It tells us we're going to go to a slightly different subject next time. This would be a good place to stop. Any questions on, well, let's just first summarize. Let's summarize what we've done today. We started by showing our mnemonic. Where's our mnemonic gone? There's our mnemonic. Returned, walked, and told stories. These were 3 things that Rabbi Yossi instituted in Sipori. One was about the how you do the shura. One was about looking after your children in the shuk, and one was about women talking in the latrines to avoid mishap with bad people. We then learnt that about the halakha. We just learnt about being able to discuss matters pertaining to death and funerals in a cemetery, and we learnt the halakha that the shura needs to be 10 people, which appears to be contemporary halakha. Any questions? Yes, Johnny.
I might be mistaken, but I think this is the first mnemonic we've had in 107 pages. Why haven't we had one before?
I think we have had a mnemonic before. We had one mnemonic, if I'm not mistaken, about something to do with the leap years.
Why haven't we had
I need to look it up, but they're not that common. You're right. They're not like, you know, one or two here and there. There are a number throughout Shas, but you're right. They're not particularly common. I think this is the second mnemonic we've had in. Bearing in mind, it might be 107 pages for you. It's only 19 pages in the Vilna Shas.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Any questions? Any further questions? Okay. We will see you. We'll see you, please God. When we see you next week, it should be hopefully as normal.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Can I